Hi, my name is Yechiel Shaffer. I'm the rabbi of the Pikesville Jewish Congregation, a small shul, growing community found in Baltimore, Maryland. If you're ever in our neighborhood, please reach out. I'd love to show you around. I'm deeply grateful for the RCA, for the role that it's played, and for the wisdom that it has offered during these challenging times, and for the network that it's created for us, a network of friends and colleagues who are reassuring and inspiring. So thank you. I wanted to share a short thought on Parshat Chukat. Obviously, it's a double Parsha this week. There's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of pressure to finish in a certain amount of time. So that's a real tension there. But Parshat Chukat raises a topic that I think is very relevant. The Parah Aduma, obviously, as we're all familiar, is a perplexing topic. It's a difficult conversation to try and explain, to try and understand. By definition, it is not understandable, right? It's a chok, as we all know, and that is a value that I think is probably more relevant today than ever before. There's so much about the current challenge that we face that we don't understand. There's so much that's ambiguous that perhaps the idea of leaning into that ambiguity and being able to embrace a world in which we don't understand everything, in which science can't explain everything, and yet we are still driven by emunah, bitachon, is probably an important value to consider and discuss. I wonder, as I was reading the Parsha, I found myself wondering why the Parah Aduma is introduced at this point. It seems that it's a korban, right? It is obviously a korban, and it seems that it directly relates to the halachot of Tuma and Tahara. So a question that struck me was, why isn't this shared in Sefer Vayikra? Why do we wait until Perek Yud Tes of Sefer Bamidbar to share the halachot, to share the laws of Parah Aduma? At very least, put it at the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar. At very best, put it in Sefer Vayikra, which is dedicated, as we all know, it's Torat Kohanim. It's dedicated to the laws of Tuma and Tahara and Karbanot. I wonder if the moment that we find ourselves in Sefer Bamidbar is significant and therefore requires a significant expression of Kedusha, a significant expression of Tahara, of holiness. The Parah Aduma is more than just a korban, right? It's the only korban that is sacrificed, more or less sacrificed outside of the Beis Hamikdash. It is a very public ceremony. It's a ceremony that you can see quite clearly. It's a ceremony that does not have to be done exclusively by Kohanim. It has to be supervised by Kohanim, but plenty of ordinary folk can involve themselves in the process of bringing the Parah Aduma, of the ceremony of the Parah Aduma, and so therefore it's unique. The moment we find ourselves in Bamidbar is a moment of transition, right? It's a moment, perhaps the language is phasing in, right? The Jewish people are phasing into this new existence of living in the promised land, and therefore the values and the ideas that shape their lives are important to consider. Up until this point, the values and ideas that shaped their community, that shaped their lives, were a centralized community, were traveling through the desert, was the struggle for survival. Even though it was not much of a struggle, they continued to make it a struggle, and perhaps that kind of informs us the nature of community and the nature of the need for people to struggle. But now that they're on the borders of the promised land, perhaps God has to introduce a new symbol to a certain sense, a new idea that speaks to communal values. The Parah Aduma is this young cow that's never worked a day in its life. It is a beautiful animal that is perfect in every way, and yet its major contribution is in its death. Its major contribution is after its life. And so perhaps while the Jewish people transition to a new reality of living in a promised land, living in Eretz Yisrael, they have to understand, they have to think about and consider the fact that their lives are more than just about what they do during their life, but it's about the values that they impart to the next generation. No longer are they wandering in the desert. No longer are they seeking out a place to live. No longer are they living with a destination. They've now reached the borders of the promised land. And so the Parah Aduma, whose life is very short, very beautiful, but very short, teaches the Jewish people that our lives are essentially very short. We have to live beautiful lives. We have to live lives that are worthy of the blessing that God gives us of being here. But fundamentally, our contributions need to not only be about the lives that we live, but need to be about building for the future. The contribution the Parah Aduma ultimately makes is enabling those who are Tamei Meit to become Tahor. Those who are impacted by the passing of a beloved one, by contact with the passing of a beloved one, need to understand most that it's the beloved one's passing that continues to make an impact on them. It's the values of prior generations that continue to make an impact. And so as the Jewish people transition to this new reality, where their community is no longer defined by the wandering Jew, but is defined by establishing communities, by building a land, by building a country, when they're no longer brought together because they have a shared goal and shared destination, they have to be brought together because they have a shared past, they have a shared history. And perhaps it's that reason why the Parah Aduma is mentioned at this moment in Sefer Bamidbar. Yes, it's about Kedusha. Yes, it's about Tara. Yes, it's about Tuma. But it represents so much more in terms of what values it's trying to teach to the Jewish people at this moment. And perhaps this can relate to the experience that we've been going through recently with the COVID-19 crisis, that it's presenting for us the status of how we impact each other. It's presenting for us the fragility of life. It's presenting to us the intentionality with which we need to design and build our communities. There's obviously a lot to say about the Parah Aduma, and part of the reason perhaps is because there's a lot that we don't understand about the Parah Aduma, so we work so hard to try and understand more about it. But fundamentally, it's a symbol. It's a symbol for the Jewish people to understand and appreciate that our regality comes from our history, and our purpose comes from the Masorah, comes from the beautiful lives that we're supposed to live. Wishing you all each good health, continued success in your shtellas, in your rabbanos, and really do appreciate you taking a few minutes to listen to some of these ideas. If you have any thoughts or any takeaways, I'd be very curious to hear them. Please share them with me. Have a wonderful day.